Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. A woman disappears from the farm, leaving behind only unanswered questions, and a man who won't stop looking for her. Why did Tuna suddenly leave? What drove Alex to search until he collapsed and was hospitalized? When they finally meet again, will she choose to return or walk away forever? And what secrets hide behind the quiet looks and unspoken words between them? Stay with us until the very end. You won't want to miss the moment she makes her choice. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to our channel and help us reach 1,000 followers. Your support means everything. The late afternoon light fell gently through the open window, scattering golden dust across the living room. Alex's mother stepped inside, her face carrying both the weariness of a long journey and the quiet joy of returning home. She set down her bag, brushing the dust from her sleeves, while Alex reached out instinctively to help her. They sat together, sharing tea. The aroma of the leaves rose in slow, curling threads, carrying the warmth of the moment. His mother spoke about her trip, meeting relatives, laughing over old memories, feeling the simple joy of being surrounded by familiar faces. Alex listened, nodding, but his thoughts wandered toward a name he had carried for weeks now. Tuna. Her absence lingered in the air like a shadow no one wished to acknowledge. Finally, he broke the silence. He told his mother he had found her, Tuna and her baby, living under the roof of a kind woman in the countryside. His words were quiet, almost hesitant, as though speaking them too firmly might break the fragile thread connecting them. His mother's eyes softened. "Will she come back?" she asked. Alex only shook his head. "I don't know. I have to wait for her answer." The conversation drifted to other things, how work had been, when they might visit their hometown again, the small changes noticed after years away. Yet beneath it all, the unspoken weight of Tuna's absence pressed between them. Outside, the wind stirred the bamboo leaves, their whispering sound oddly like the rustle of a distant memory, one that refused to fade. Rain pressed against the glass, tracing slow, silver paths downward. The hospital room was quiet, save for the faint hum of a distant machine. Alex lay on the bed, pale against the white sheets, the weariness in his eyes deeper than the shadows beneath them. Weeks of searching had worn him thin, days under the punishing sun, nights chasing faint leads, all for a glimpse of someone who had quietly slipped away. He had imagined finding her at the bus station or in the market, carrying her child. Instead, what he found was exhaustion, so deep it claimed him without warning. The doctors said it was nothing irreversible, just a body pushed beyond its limit. But Alex knew it was more than that. It was the weight of not knowing, of caring without an answer. Somewhere miles away, Tuna heard the news. At first, she didn't move. The thought of returning stirred too many questions, too much pride, too much fear. Yet that night, she lay awake listening to her baby breathe, and the image of Alex, alone, struggling, refused to leave her. By morning, she decided. She arrived quietly, slipping into the hospital room without fanfare. Alex opened his eyes, surprised. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with everything they couldn't say. She asked how he was. He told her with a faint smile that he was better now. And though his voice was soft, there was a steady thread in it. an unspoken plea for her to come back, not just for the work, but because without her, the place no longer felt whole. The warmth of home wrapped around Alex as he stepped inside, the faint scent of rice and simmering broth greeting him before his mother's smile did. It had been days since he'd left the hospital, and though his body was still recovering, he moved through the rooms with a quiet determination. That evening, the dining table glowed under the soft yellow light. Steamed eggs, fresh greens, bowls of fragrant soup all set neatly in their places. His sister was already there, seated beside their mother, her expression a mixture of hesitation and resolve. Over the meal, conversation drifted through familiar topics. His mother's trip, the latest harvest at the farm, until his sister's voice softened. "I went to see Tuna," she said, glancing briefly at Alex before lowering her gaze. "I owed her an apology for the way I spoke to her before." She told them how she had found Tuna in a quiet village, holding her child, and how the young woman had listened silently as she recounted Alex's search. The days in the rain, the nights without rest, the fever that left him in a hospital bed. Alex said nothing, but his chopsticks paused mid-air. His mother's eyes, filled with quiet concern, moved between them. "She didn't promise anything," his sister continued, "but I think she's thinking about it." A stillness settled over the table. Outside, the wind tapped softly against the window, as if echoing the waiting that had come to define Alex's days. In his heart, hope stirred, fragile but alive. Morning light stretched long shadows across the yard as Alex tightened the strap on his watch. There was work to be done, another meeting, another negotiation, but his thoughts kept drifting elsewhere. Still, business demanded presence, and today's meeting with Tony, a long-term contact, could not be ignored. They met at a small roadside cafe, the air warm with the scent of roasted coffee. Alex spoke with his usual measured calm, though his mind worked quickly, gauging every detail of the conversation. The topic was bamboo: age, quality, volume, and most importantly, the price. Tony was direct, eyes sharp with calculation. Alex proposed a visit to the hills themselves. "See it with your own eyes," he said, the confidence in his tone coming from years of walking those slopes. Minutes later, they were standing amidst rows of tall green stalks, the sun catching on the smooth surfaces. Alex gestured to the height, the thickness, the health of the grove. Tony examined the grove with care, running his hand along the grain of a cut stalk. 18,000 per tree is fair, he said at last, but I can stretch to 18,500 for this quality. The agreement came with a firm handshake. It was a victory, yet not the kind that lingered in Alex's chest. As they walked back towards their cars, his gaze caught the distant curve of the road, the one that led away from the farm. Somewhere down that road was Tuna, and no contract, no profit could weigh more heavily than the thought of her answer. The road to the small hillside home wound through groves of bamboo and patches of wild grass. Alex's car slowed as the house came into view. A modest place, weathered but cared for. He stepped out, the gravel crunching softly beneath his shoes. Batang greeted him at the gate, her hands still damp from washing vegetables. She led him inside where Tuna sat, her child asleep in the crook of her arm. The sight held him still for a moment, the soft curve of her shoulder, the quiet rise and fall of the baby's breath. "I wanted to ask," he began, his voice steady but low, "if you've decided." Tuna's gaze shifted to the floor. "I've been thinking," she said. Her words carried a weight that made the air between them feel taut. Batung set down the basket she was holding. "He came all this way for you, child. And you know the farm needs you. More than that, perhaps he does too." Tuna hesitated. Memories of long days in the fields, of laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves, came unbidden. But so did the ache of leaving, the fear of being too bound to a place, to a person. "I don't know if it's right," she murmured. Alex met her eyes then, holding them with quiet patience. "If it is, you'll know when you see the farm again," he said. Outside, a breeze moved through the bamboo, its whisper threading into the room like an invitation neither of them could yet name. Afternoon light poured through the open doorway, dust motes drifting like slow rain in the golden air. Tuna stood by the low table, folding the last of her baby's clothes into a worn canvas bag. Each motion was deliberate, as if she were tracing the edges of her decision with her hands. Alex moved quietly around the room, helping gather the few belongings: a small kettle, a blanket, a bundle of baby toys. His presence was steady, filling the space without pressing it. Outside, Batung's voice called in gentle reminders to eat well, to rest, to take care of the child. Before stepping out, Tuna turned back. "You've given me shelter when I had nowhere else to go," she told Batung, her voice tight with gratitude. "I will never forget." The older woman smiled, brushing away the thanks with a wave. "Just promise me you'll make a good life there." The yard felt different now, lighter, though threaded with a bittersweet note. The air carried the scent of wet earth and bamboo leaves. Alex lifted the bag onto his shoulder, then took the baby into his arms, the small weight settling naturally against him. They walked toward the waiting car. Behind them, Batung stood at the doorway, her figure framed in fading light. Tuna glanced back once, committing the scene to memory. The woman who had been her safe harbor, the place that had held her in the storm. The door closed with a soft click, sealing the choice she had made. The car rolled slowly down the narrow dirt road, its tires pressing faint tracks into the damp earth. Inside, the cabin was quiet, save for the soft, rhythmic breath of the baby sleeping in Tuna's arms. Her gaze drifted to the window, watching the hills and bamboo groves slip past like pages turning in a book she wasn't sure she was ready to close. Beside her, Alex kept his eyes on the road, both hands steady on the wheel. The late light carved lines of gold along his profile. Neither spoke, yet the silence felt full, of questions unasked, of gratitude unspoken, of a tentative hope neither dared name aloud. She thought of the days he'd searched for her, the fever that had taken him to the hospital, the way his sister's voice had softened when telling her the story. She didn't know if his care was born of love or simply of kindness. Perhaps it didn't matter. What she did know was that his presence had pulled her back from the edge of drifting too far. As the road opened into the familiar stretch leading to the farm, Tuna felt a shift within herself. The uncertainty remained, but so did the quiet assurance that she was returning to a place where her child might grow without fear. Alex glanced at her, just once, as if to confirm she was still there. Not in body, but in choice. The car moved forward, carrying them into the pale horizon, where endings and beginnings blurred into one long, steady line. And that is how Tu Na's journey brought her back to the place she once left behind. But is this truly a new beginning, or just the next chapter of an unfinished story? Will the quiet bond between her and Alex grow into something more, or fade like a shadow at dusk? Only time will answer. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and help us reach 1,000 followers, so you won't miss the next chapter of their fate. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.